G'day friends and foes, I'm Arjay Martin and this is TINLA episode 25. Basically this is following up on what happened today, which is the 24th of May 2020 in relation to the Brisbane authorised protest against the lockdown, as well as political rally to hopefully create both federally and state based, but a new political party called Reset Parliament. And basically the idea is that it would be a party of independence, so people aren't bound to, the party constitution in terms of policies or whatnot. So that way you can get candidates and hopefully elected officials who actually represent your wishes and not just that of their political party. So I think that would be a lot better system. And anyway, so I went there today. We had probably about 9 people with our group, and we met in King George Square in Brisbane. When we got there, we only had about 3 people at first, and there were 8 police officers, which I thought was a bit excessive and a waste of taxpayer money and whatnot. They were friendly, went to introduce myself. They were happy with that, asked me how many people were expected. I said, I don't know. There's, maybe 4 or 5 coming or something so far that I see or whatever, because, some other people came after myself. And then they were happy and thanked me for being forthright, which of course I was. And as I said, what's the point of not, doing that? And then at about 1:45, I think it might have been, we marched to Parliament via Adelaide Street and then George Street. And then at Speaker's Corner, there were probably another 15 or 20 protesters, some of which were there for the previous 2 weeks. And, so there's probably protesting on the day at Speaker's Corner, probably around 25-30 people, I guess. And or maybe even a few less, maybe it's more like 18. But anyway, it's excellent that other people care as well. And then the police sergeant did get narky at me, saying, look, the condition was you only had 10 people because we've got these stupid COVID restrictions, which are unlawful anyway. And I did already inform that officer that when she was being, all friendly and whatever at King George Square, and the reasons why, some of the reasons. So anyway, she did get narky at me, thinking that everyone there was for my group, Reset Parliament, which was not the case. And that sort of annoyed me, being falsely accused of that. It's like when I went to the shop the other day and we had some stuff that was already purchased from elsewhere, as well as something that was purchased from a supermarket as well, and then basically got accused of stealing. The woman was like, where's your receipt for that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. And then turned out it was in my pocket anyway, but I didn't know that I had it in my pocket. And then she was like, oh, which checkout did you go through? And I said, oh, it was this one. But there was another lady here, and she looked like XYZ. And then it turned out the other lady was then in a customer service section, and then she called over someone to go check with that person, and then I found the receipt when they walked off. But, it's not nice to be falsely accused of stuff. And then, as I pointed out, there were people from various political parties and other organisations. There was a gent from, say, one of the communist parties that's probably been there for many weeks. It seems that he goes there every weekend. He's a nice fella, Adam. And there were people from the Great Australian Party, my Reset Parliament Party, all that kind of thing, as well as other people that were protesting, say, against 5G or the sale of water to foreigners and sale of all our businesses to foreigners, and some pro-vaccine safety people. So, vaccines are contaminated, including with stealth-adapted viruses. They are never tested for. These include things like simian virus 40 or simian vacuolating virus 40, as well as, and that's supposed to be the number one cancer-causing thing in the world, by the way, and they actually inject it into mice and, ferrets and whatever else to induce cancers or sarcomas in, mice or rats or whatever, to then do treatments or trial drugs or whatever. Also simian, and simian means monkey, by the way, simian cytomegalovirus is another example, which is renamed just cytomegalovirus because they dropped the references to the monkeys, just like nuclear magnetic resonance imaging. They dropped the N off to just call it magnetic resonance imaging because it doesn't sound like it's radioactive or whatever. But anyway, so that part was a little bit disappointing, and it was very low key in King George Square. But then I was told by the sergeant about, social distancing, blah, blah, blah. So I suggested that I could go to the different groups and individuals there and ask if they would like to move more in the square section of Speaker's Corner. And the police officer, said that would be a good idea or whatever, because that way people could spread out more. Then we did that. So probably half of my little group went there, and then a lot of people know each other from the previous 2 weeks protesting. And then eventually others went there too, and there were some little speeches and whatnot. A lot of people, a couple of people had, I guess I should say, more proper speeches prepared, but if there were people that we didn't already see for the last 2 weeks there. Because as one person said, what's the point of preaching to the already converted? And converted as in, people that support liberty and against the lockdown. Anyway, so then we had everyone sort of go over from the different groups and the individuals that were there to then go to where Speaker's Corner is in case people wanted to do speeches, and people did their little speeches. I just did like a little intro and then was going to do another speech, but it is a valid point. What's the point of doing a big speech if it is not a fresh audience? As well as, I could waffle on about the legalities of the lockdown, that people that were already there, a lot of them sorry, I'm losing my voice. A lot of them have already seen my TINLA videos as to why the lockdown is illegal. Specific legal references such as to sections 117, section 92, section 69 of the Constitution as an example, section 51, subsection 23A, that kind of thing. But anyway, it became more interesting when people were doing speeches, and there are some excellent speeches that people did off the cuff and otherwise as well. And, hopefully you can see that we went out and we weren't arrested. It was interesting when we went to do photos that the police started taking our photos. They're probably going to send me a fine or something, thinking that the 20 people or whatever it was were all my people, which isn't the case. In which case, there's ways around that anyway, in terms of, I can show that people weren't there all for me, as well as the directions are unlawful anyway for various reasons, including not being enforced, for not being gazetted. Under the Statutory Instruments Act, directions have to be gazetted, which are classed as subordinate legislation, in order for it to take force, and that's exempted subordinate legislation. Anyway, so it was a good sort of family fun day, Sunday, if you want to call it that. Some people had some children there, just 2 children, like little ones, and it was more interesting when we went to Speaker's Corner and actually had some speeches, and there were excellent speeches done by people, as I said, but, it's good for people to see that you can actually go out and protest and not be arrested by the police. Sure, I might well get a fine, an unjust one, but, such is life. And basically, these things need to be done anyway to fight not only for my freedom, but your freedom, and the freedom of all those that couldn't be bothered or couldn't make it or whatever, or are too obedient and trusting of government in general. It's a valid point that basically when people turned away from churches, that they started worshipping government, because basically the old style churches or whatever used to be like the government. The Pope was a head of a country, still is a head of a country, and stuff like that. So basically, I think it's a terrible thing that in society nowadays, as of the past, few months or whatever, you have to ask the government for permission for anything. It's like if you live in a boarding school or something like that, not that I have, but, or even a normal school, asking for permission. Hey, miss, can I go to the toilet? Oh, you should have went at lunchtime, you're not going. That kind of thing, a paternalistic, maternalistic society. Whereas, we're all supposed to be adults, those of us that are adults, and should make our own decisions for our own selves. We also, with the different groups, the cord looks funny, it's like blending into my neck, the colour of it. Sorry, easily distracted. Anyway, so please watch the videos that follow. I hope you enjoy them. I hope that you see that it is fine to go out and protest. And with the exemptions, just to explain that, I did apply early last week for an exemption for the 10-person limit, these so-called health directions or COVID directions, and magically the government couldn't deal with it in time. And I did call around Friday to every single state and territory, to the Ministry of Health and health departments, besides New South Wales because I didn't need to for that, and also Queensland because I already knew how to apply for their exemptions by then. And I also called the Queensland Health Department and spoke about the exemptions, and then was basically told you have to wait at least 7 days before we can hurry it up, and the only way you can get an urgent application is if it's a funeral, that you can't get it for a wedding. And I said, well, with weddings you have to give 30 days notice, so you're going to get married anyway, so people, besides it is invalid anyway, the directions, and unlawful for other reasons, that if someone's getting married, they have 30 days to inform people when and where it's going to be, so people can make arrangements. And then the lady persisted, and I said, well, isn't the death of democracy far worse than the death of a single individual in the big picture kind of thing? A big, zoomed out, looking at the forest, not just the individual trees kind of, method of looking at things. And then she just sort of went silent and then said, oh, I'll go ask my supervisor, something like that. Then a supervisor later called me and said that they were going to try and rush it through, basically. And then I didn't hear anything back from them, and it was already past 5 p.m. by then. And anyway, I do have protests planned for every state and territory capital as long as there's interest. And also people to assist by being team leaders or organisers. Basically, you fill out a form and put it into the police, that kind of thing, and that would be very helpful if people were doing that. But for the 30th, so in Brisbane, it'll be from 1 to 3 p.m, starting at King George Square and making it again to Parliament House. Maybe via a different route, because there are other groups also applying, such as Millions March Against Mandatory Vaccinations, and there was something like Picnicking King George Square for Freedom or something like that. So, it's good to combine forces and, have people meet in the same place. Especially when they are for similar things like, pro-vaccine safety and, and the lockdown, that kind of thing. So trying to work with others instead of, some groups have egotistical people that want all the glory or credit for things, but I think it's far better and more effective if people combine forces for the sake of freedom. And anyway, so then, what else? Well, let me know what you think. Please like, share, subscribe, donate some money if you're able to. I am trying to get legal standing, acquire legal standing to challenge these COVID directions in every state and territory. That, of course, costs money because basically, the law has to affect you in a particular manner. So if I'm in Queensland at the moment and don't travel outside of Queensland, and then don't arrange protests, that kind of thing, in every state and territory, then, if I were to apply to challenge the laws in Western Australia as an example, then the courts would likely throw that out, saying that I don't have legal standing or a special interest, if you want to call it like that. I am also happy to see that 2 days ago it was reported that Clive Palmer either suggested or did lodge perhaps a High Court action against Western Australia about the illegal lockdown because they refused entry for him. Sorry about that, just had a phone call. So I am trying to go around and get legal standing, and that does cost money. I want to get like a little camper van and travel around Australia. That way I am affected by the lockdowns. If you've got a camper van I can borrow, automatic one, then that would be helpful. If you got one and we can do a quick trip around Australia through every state and mainland territory, besides, Jervis Bay really gets lumped in with Canberra or the ACT, but, that would be very helpful. So, as I was saying before the phone rang, I'm glad that Clive Palmer is apparently going to lodge a High Court action. It does seem in a way that, he wants to have the achievement of winning something in a High Court, and that's fair enough. In terms of lodging, a few different applications for different electoral things. So back in a 2013 election, he was lodging, from memory, to prohibit, like get an injunction against the news from reporting the election results in the eastern states while the western states were voting, and that is fair enough because that can influence an election, even though the information could come out anyway, but it would be in a less bulk form so that people are affected less particularly, if that makes sense. But I also saw that yesterday there's apparently a link to Pauline Hanson, suggested she might take the Palaszczuk government to the High Court over the border lockdown as well, so that's excellent. Perhaps they have seen my videos over the past 2 months when I suggested people would be good to go out and protest, and some of the reasons why the lockdown was illegal, such as Section 92 of the Constitution, in terms of not having border restrictions, as in internal borders. And anyway, so that's excellent in itself. It is very important and beneficial if basically you can have a single court case that deals with all of the different states and territories' lockdowns, as opposed to trying to do it piecemeal. Otherwise, it is a bit like the Vlad Act, the anti-association acts that succeeded in some states and failed in some states in terms of challenging their validity. And then also just say if 5 of the 8 jurisdictions were to be invalid with the lockdowns, and if the High Court deals with them together, then perhaps they knock down the other 3 as well, because, to have consistency of law, that kind of thing. Another thing is, just say if I only challenged it in Queensland, and then 6 months later there's a victory, just not trying to anticipate the court's judgment, but you know what I mean. And then someone, say in Western Australia, says, oh, okay, well, I'm going to challenge it because I got, affected in some way. Then the court by then, say the state by then might not have the COVID restrictions in place, and the court might then throw it out for being a moot point. So basically, hey, look, you don't have this lockdown period anymore, so it's over, so we're not going to deal with it. And then the person says, hey, well, look, Queensland just got knocked on the head in terms of the invalid laws, but then the court can still say, no, too bad, it's no longer an issue. But anyway, so that's why I think it's very important. I'm sticking my neck out for people too, so it would be helpful if some people that could afford it could support my efforts. You can make a donation personally at paypal.me/Arjay Martin. And then, let me know what you think of the protest and the speeches in particular. And, it follows from here. Anyway, cheerio. Thank you. Bye. So here we are at the protest, and we've got about 10 police nearly for our 4 people protesting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 8, I think.
Do you want a soapbox?
Yes, sir. Stand on my tiptoes. So today is the 24th of May, and we've got various groups and individuals gathered here at Parliament House in Queensland. We're at Speaker's Corner. My group in particular, Reset Parliament. You're fine. Come in. Reset Parliament. I'm intending on setting up a political party that will basically be of independence, so people aren't bound to certain policies, so that their members and candidates can represent the will and wishes of everyone, not just their political party. We also have at least 2 other parties represented here. The Great Australia Party was somewhere, and what party's your one? The Workers' League, is that an actual party? yeah, so, you know, a small group, the Workers' League, and there's other people here as well. Seems a lot of people do have similar interests, and one of those is banning or removing, getting rid of this unlawful lockdown. So the lockdown is unlawful for a number of reasons, including constitutional reasons, including that the directions have not even been gazetted. Therefore, under the Statutory Instruments Act, it's not even enforced, yet unfortunately, you know, people have been fined unjustly and, you know, arrested even, potentially.
I think Mom's calling you.
Elsewhere in Australia. And, you know, it might well be the case in Victoria that it hasn't been gazetted, and that might well be a requirement there as well, as another example. But I'm proud of every single one of you that have come here today from all walks of life. Unfortunately, there's not that many people, but, you know, we've got quality over quantity at the moment. And so there were also protests here in this same location for the past 2 weeks, with, again, various groups, or 3 weeks, whatever. So a few weeks ago there were about 60 or 70 people here. Then there was probably about 25, something like that. And this week, you know, we've got, you know, maybe 20 people, but, you know, we're 20 people that actually care. I've recognised a lot of you from previous weeks as well. And, you know, as I said, I'm very proud of everyone here for taking a stand against this unlawful lockdown. And hopefully other people can also wake up. It is important not to insult other people, even though, in my opinion, you know, people should be fighting for their rights and their freedoms, liberties, especially where the government is breaking the law. And the government is breaking the law, I submit, and that's how it is. So does anyone else want to do a little speech or whatever?
Yeah, I'll do it. Thank you very much, Arjay. Beautiful work.
Caesar.
Okay, there's quite a few issues that people are coming out and speaking up about. We encourage all of it. We encourage information. What have we got here? Oh, fake crisis, fake laws, fake news. If you look at the percentage of people that have actually been infected, Thanos is going over this in great detail. It's actually like less than 1% that's actually been infected. And then out of those figures, a lot, like majority have recovered. And I think that the statistics were 7,700 so far in Australia were infected, and we've only had 100 deaths at last count. I mean, does that make sense that we shut down the whole country? Like 100 deaths, you know, 7,000 people infected out of 26 million.
Fake news.
That's less than 1%. Fake news, fake crisis, fake laws. You know what I mean? They're actually guidelines. They're guidelines. So they've just got everybody rattled, thinking they're laws, but they're not. Arrest Bill Gates. He's a devil. You know what I mean? Like, he wants to turn $10 billion into $200 billion. I mean, like,
In one
you know,
year.
yeah, in 1 year, just by
21 return.
by vaccinating 7.5 billion of the population. Notice it's 7.5 billion, not 8 billion, because the 500 billion that are left outstanding are in his crony, big state satanic mates.
I actually
They're all
did
behind
hear that you need 2 doses, so it was going to be 14 billion.
Oh, there you go, you see.
Yeah, he's a good boy.
It's all about it's all about making money. This Bill Gates doesn't care about people really, and we're just a 7.5 billion to him. I want you to know you are all appreciated. You aren't just a number to us. We love you all. We love you all, and it's going to be love, peace, and kindness that defeats this craziness that's going on in the world. Open the Queensland borders now, because family businesses are suffering. Pauline Hanson's getting very vocal about this one particular issue, and I think fair enough too. Queensland businesses are suffering. Small family businesses are suffering without the Queensland borders open, and we need to be able to travel freely across the country wherever we choose to go. Part of our liberty, pro-liberty. So open Australia as well. Open all the borders up.
Even Dreamworld?
And even
Dreamworld.
Dreamworld has to open again. Come on.
Instead of saying we're anti-vaccination or anti anything, like I'll go with pro-information, pro-education, pro-liberty, pro-choice, pro-freedom, and pro-safety. Where's the test showing these vaccinations are safe?
They're not. There isn't.
That's right, there isn't. So that needs to be addressed. It's a safety issue, a health and safety issue more than anything else. Stop 5G because there's just way too much information out there that, like, for them to be unrolling it on us and not answering the questions, the appropriate questions, that's wrong. They need to stop 5G and look into that technology. It's weaponized technology. Stop human trafficking, that's a worldwide issue, and make Australia great again 2020. We appreciate you all coming this week. We appreciate you all coming every week, you know what I mean? So this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're gonna do it. We won't go silently, you know what I mean? So this is it. God bless you all. Thank you all for coming. We need to do this every week. Next Saturday's the big one. Bring everyone.
Yep,
Yeah,
thank you.
Lunch for everyone.
Our country,
Lunch for everyone.
our water.
You're going to do a little speech, Magnus.
Let's do it.
Where you going? Dolphin Pits?
No, I haven't seen it.
Hi.
I'll send it now.
They're so
Share it with me. Anything you want, send it to me. Anything you've got.
We need it back.
Slavery
Which
laws.
is right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's all our country.
they are. They're selling our infrastructure, selling our ports, selling our farms, pushing us off the land. You tell them, boys.
Stop.
Stop selling everything. We need our stuff back.
Well done.
Woo!
Yes.
That's
Well
it,
done.
Agnes.
Anyone else want to speak?
Okay.
Adam, you want to? Oh, sorry.
Oh no!
They won't fall much further.
Thank you for being here today. Thank you, Arjay, for organising this and getting the permits. Thank you, Hayley, for rocking it out with me on the car on the way up. I actually have hot off the press here is something that's going to all of our health ministers and our counsellors. We've got to get and make friends with our counsellors, people, because I'm speaking particularly about the HPV vaccine right now, but we need to be asking these educators if they can supply the name of the doctor who is responsible for prescribing the medication. They don't have it. It's unlawful. If a doctor has not prescribed the medication, who undertook the medical legal responsibility for injecting that into our children? Nobody's taking responsibility. The ones that have to take responsibility are the me's of the world and the other parents out there with vaccine injured children. And it's not on, and I'm seeing more and more and more of it. I'm on Facebook groups, here's my girl. I'm on Facebook groups and I've got a bunch of screenshots that I'm going to be doing a video on. I have seen evidence of a woman absolutely beside herself, not knowing what to do with her 11-year-old autistic child. She's asking, can we call the police? Can we call the police on my child because he is hurting me? He is hurting his brothers and his sisters. He is uncontrollable. Do you know why he's uncontrollable? Because his brain's fried. His brain's fried from the vaccines that are so freaking safe and effective. They are not safe. They are not effective. This injury is real. It's not rare. And we need to wake everybody up to this. I hope we see thousands of people right in this spot next week. Here next week, Brisbane people, Queensland people, get here. They're okay, we haven't been arrested and we're pretty much done. But you know what? Seriously, we can't line our kids up and our future generations up for what we have. I have a video that Arjay and I recorded last week with one of the top virologists in the world. He was Anthony Fauci's boss last century. This guy knows his stuff, and he said there is not one vaccine on the schedule that is safe to put into human bodies. Judy Mikovits says the same thing. Come on, we have to wake up. I know we're all awake.
It's all just money. They're just paying the
It
media
is
to tell
just
everyone
money.
lies.
Yeah.
The tell-lie vision, that's all it is.
That's exactly right. And Hayley's going to say something to close us off. Thank you.
That was a very good speech, Mum.
Thank you, Dad. You're going to do a speech?
Woo! Just say Willow and Archie and all of those babies that are coming through.
Absolutely. So let me explain. Willow is a friend of ours, baby. And Archie is another friend of ours, baby. And this is why Hayley's here. Because she doesn't want Willow or Archie to be injured like she was.
So that's Ebony's kid.
That's right. And they're precious. Every kid's precious, huh? Yeah, and we want to protect them, don't we?
We have to be the voice for our children.
Every life matters. Every life matters.
Every single life matters.
Co-creationists.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Hayley. I love you.
Woo!
I don't get a hug today, but that's all right. Who's next? Oh, Simeon gets a hug. Come on, Adam.
I'll come and have a go.
Good on you, bud.
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks for all coming today and previous speeches and Arjay, everything's really well organised. Thanks again. Let's try and get some real numbers down here next week, eh? Next week's got to be the big one. There's so many topics and subjects we're all talking about, which are all legitimate, every single one of them. But the one thing that I find in common with all of them is we're supposed to be living in a democracy. Where's the people's voice for vaccination, for lockdown, for anything? The media will not do their job, will not ask the questions that the government needs to answer. We need to have a voice in this country for the people. Simple as that. There are that many simple questions that we just get told the experts, we're following the experts. Now Queensland is not following the experts. They've still got the borders shut when the experts say open them. Where is the people's voice here? We're destroying the economy, people's lives, families, suicide rates are going through the roof, probably claimed as COVID deaths. This is getting out of control. We need everyone here next week. We need the people to have a voice in this country.
Well, technically they are COVID deaths if they're killing themselves because of depression and whatever being locked up. But that's what they do. They, manipulate the reasons. If someone gets,
Statistics.
yeah,
Correct.
which is Bill Gates' favourite book.
His book. He even sells it online. How to lie with statistics. So I'd just like to ask everybody to bring as many friends next week, and let's get a real voice for the people. Let's get some motion going and start putting the pressure on the government to answer the basic questions of our freedom of rights.
Yep, and I also, just so you know, put in another exemption form for the 10 people for next weekend's protest, but put it in last week so they can't do what they did this week and just delay and then not approve it in time.
God bless you, Arjay. Great work, brother.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks,
Woo!
everyone.
Who else? Adam, come up, speak.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. These protests are really important because it's not just the size that we have here. These protests, anti-lockdown protests, are linking up with important ones that are taking place in the United States. Huge demonstrations against the lockdowns in Germany, in UK and other places. So even though they might appear small here, they are part of that movement, which is really just probably the Western countries, Australia, the US, Europe mainly, who are trying to impose lockdowns against everyone. And
New Zealand's even worse off than us.
New Zealand's worse off, much worse. And these governments do not have the legal authority to do this. They do not have the legal authority to lock us down, to force us into vaccines, to stop business taking place. There is no legal authority for this. They are just imposing us. And in my opinion, they are preparing us for a second round or a much more dangerous option, which is possibly war against Russia, against China, against Iran. Because if they do launch this war, which they've been trying to do, or the Western powers have been trying to do for about 10 years, at least or more.
Through NATO.
Through NATO, exactly. If they do try to spark that, then and everybody's locked down, everybody's isolated and kept away from each other, obviously these governments and these imperialist powers can get away with murder, with a huge war, a war which it's going
Finances them, gives them shitloads of money.
yeah, they make money from this war. So yeah, I'd just like to encourage people to keep going with these protests because they are losing legitimacy daily. More and more people are questioning them, even if there's a few people who are prepared to speak out about it. I would say the half, if not the majority of people, say that these lockdowns don't make any sense and they're not dealing with the virus. So these protests are important. We've got to keep it going and definitely try and get everybody there
boys, skate hard, boys.
next Saturday on May 30, because there's going to be demonstrations against these lockdowns, against the closure of the state borders next Saturday, May 30. So be there.
Thank you. Woo! Protests will be Australia-wide, hopefully, on next Saturday. There's various groups doing them. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll give it a crack. Okay, like I had a written down speech, but I'm going to save it because I don't want to be saying it to the converted.
Yep.
I want to say it to the people who are asleep or are just starting to wake up. So I'm going to save my proper speech for a later time. But I still believe that if we're going to do anything about this, we need to find incontestable grounds so that we don't get into a debate. I don't want to have to worry about legalese or semantics or any other bullshit. I just want to get down to something that's pure. Okay, that's why I practice the Magna Carta 1215, because I'm not part of their system anymore. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't respect it. I don't trust them. And as far as I'm concerned, if it comes to push and shove and pure violence, I'm more than happy to do that as well.
God bless you.
Because they need to be fearful for the crimes they're doing against the population they're supposed to be protecting. And it makes me sick. It makes me absolutely sick to my stomach that these people can justify what they're doing, these corporate officers, because they want to protect their wage. Who gives a shit about your wage? Because at least the Gestapo had a belief system. These people don't even have a belief system.
where's the humanity?
So they're worse than Gestapo.
Where's the humanity in them?
Right? And if it goes to the Hague, you don't have any position, you have no authority, and you have no credibility because you're doing it for money. Right? It makes me so angry. I love my little boy. Unfortunately, I've turned him into a bit of a revolutionary at 9 years old, so maybe I've overstepped the mark, but shit happens.
Good for him.
Right? But after I'm dead, he has to carry the baton. And the whole idea about being a good, loving, caring parent is passing the baton smoothly. So there's no stop and start, you know what I mean? It's a smooth transition. And because I give that smooth transition of that baton change, they're able to run faster and further and better than I did. And that's what our goal is as a parent. Now with these vaccines, if they're giving poisons to our children, if they're making them sick, if they're introducing foreign DNA, if they're just making them anything other than the most perfect being that they could potentially be naturally, and also the fact that we can spiritually heal ourselves because we are a spiritual being having a material experience. There is 4 levels of the self. There's the material self. These intellectuals, these scientists, these officers, these corporate officers, these gangsters, they're only dealing on one level, and they're geniuses. They're so smart. They're academically so proficient. They're a lot smarter than us, but they're only working on the lowest frequency. I'm not as smart as them. I don't claim to be as smart as them, but I have a panoramic view of the situation. Sorry. Panoramic book, the fish was this big. Right? But then beyond this, we have people like Wim Hof, who are still in the physical, but they're using their breath control and with a bit of meditation, and they're starting going to the metaphysical. That's when we start to draw ourselves out of the physical realm. And then we start to go to the esoteric, right? Then we start to go to another level. And then beyond that, what do? We create oneness with our Creator. And then we reach the divine. That's our experience. That's our journey. We are all fractured. You call it the fall from grace. You call it the descent of man. You call it, taking the apple and eating it from the snake. Whatever you want to call it. We want to work our way back to singularity. We are all one. That's why the Roman numeral of 1 is
I, because I and God are one, not two. When I talk about selfish things, when I talk about my wage, when I talk about my career, when I talk about any of this physical bullshit, that's me. That's my separation. That's my fracturing from the source. But that's not what I am. That's what me is. I and God are one. I believe that I am this tree. I believe that I am all of you. I believe that I am everything around us, and energy is everywhere, and Tesla proved it. And these bastards took his shit and they put it underground. And now we're paying for electricity through a third person. Origin made $7 billion last financial year by on-selling our power to us. They're spilling our water from private dams that we paid for into open forests to waste it, to make it go up as a commodity on their water stock exchange. These positions are not contestable. These positions cannot be argued. And if you argue with these positions about selling our water, selling our land, selling our infrastructure, and doing it all for your own private gain, then you are my enemy. And I will smite you down, because I am the right hand of God, the vengeful right hand of God. And I'm sick of it.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, well done.
Now, before I finish up, I'd just like to say, and calm down, because we all can get emotional.
Yes.
But the problem with emotion is that you've got to be able to keep it under rein. So when we have a debate and we do get heated, we need to then be able to retreat back to ourselves and say, this person is just a person, fellow as me, and they're not my enemy potentially, they can be my friend. Because when you go into a fight, as a trained fighter, it doesn't start when we start throwing punches, it starts from across the room with a scowl or a smile. So if we smile at our enemy, we try and embrace them, we try and explain to them, we try to appease them, we try all the logical things that we can do as a good human being. But if that doesn't work, well then we take the next step. And that course of action is pretty much, well, I'm hoping we can avoid it, but I'm not too sure if we can. But one way or the other, if we're fearless, our potential is limitless.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, guys.
Woo!
Where are you going?
I'm here. Where are you going?
Do you want to do a speech?
Come on.
I'd like to say a few words.
Okay.
The agents of this oppression can't have any excuse.
Hi everyone, my name is Tanya and I don't represent any political party or representative. It's just me. First, I'd like to acknowledge past, present and emerging traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and recognize their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I also want to pay my respects to the Anzacs who gave their life for the liberty of this country.
God bless you. Yes, amen.
As a living woman of the living soil, I represent the truth, not lies. I represent results, not excuses. I represent freedom, not corruption. I represent the Constitution, not subversion. I represent independence and liberty. Under the present unnecessary draconian government directives, thousands of Australians have lost their jobs and can't feed their families. Domestic violence and abuse have skyrocketed, not to mention the suicide rate amongst the male population.
Yep. So true.
I want to give my voice to the voiceless. We don't want enforcement. We want respect. We don't want control. We want choice. We don't want abuse. We want civil, constructive debate.
Yes, amen.
Together, we are the wave of change.
Yes, we are.
We, the living man and the living woman of the living soil, abide only by truth, respect and honor. Thank
God
you.
bless you. Thank you. Heartfelt. That's what we need. Heartfelt.
Wow. That's the woman's touch.
Yeah.
That's
Anyone
the
else?
woman's touch. Wow, beautiful.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Okay.
We appreciate all the help we get, so we appreciate your presence.
We're going to sing the national anthem too.
We value you. Yeah.
Yes.
May as well.
And we complement each other. That red energy, that blue energy.
Who wants to sing the national anthem?
Australia.
And all let us rejoice, for we are young and free, with golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is girt by sea, our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. Woo! In joyful strains and let us sing, advance Australia fair. Thank you.
Yes.
You're doing my live next time because I sound like crap. Alright, and can we also just join in the Lord's Prayer? Who knows that one off by heart?
I do, I need to be started, it's been a while.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
He layeth me down in green. This is actually a poignant moment. That says a lot about our culture, how it's being decimated.
I know Matthew 6:9 part of the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Yes.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive those who sin against us.
Lead us not into temptation,
But deliver us from the wicked one.
for the glory,
Yep.
the kingdom is yours, Lord.
Yep.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, stuff that up and going to practice the next
Yeah, there's something to be sex though.
Arjay, you're a legend.
Thank you.
Gorgeous. Yes.
Yeah, by all means.
Yep.
That was.
You gonna put these faces at the back again?
We can hold them, I guess.
I just put myself out there for anyone.
Excellent speeches. I feel like that I should be more prepared. Everyone's like professionals. I'm like, what?
No, well, you started the ball rolling, man. But the thing is, you've got that political centre. That's where you start from, and so that governs where you come from and where you go. You know, but someone like myself, which is basically a pure vigilante and really quite negative about the whole idea of being able to do passive resistance.
Yeah.
I'm doing the most Puritan version I can.
Yeah.
But I'm also planning for the most violent action as well.
Yeah, and not that you're going to do that, but
No.
people should always plan for the unexpected.
And that's my skill set.
Yeah,
And that's my skill set.
Yeah, well, it's
So
even like
why
some
don't I
people.
utilise it?
Yeah, and some people say, you know, our government would never do that. But even if that was true, what about the next government that, you know, they have the precedent of locking people up for no reason, forced
If
quarantine.
they get this new world order in, the only way we'll stop them is drowning them in our dead bodies. And if you're prepared to do that, then you're worth 10. My dad always told me, he was a Royal Marine, and he told me one farmer protecting his home is worth 10 of the best trained special forces.
Yep.
And that is symbolic, and that's why the Vietnamese have kept the Chinese out of Vietnam for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That kind of dedication. Schools underground, hospitals underground, houses underground, while they're just bombing the crap in deep forests.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, mate, very soon.
Yeah, you want to hold a sign? I'm sure Pelham doesn't mind us holding his sign.
Yeah, mate. Hey, Magnus, can you hold
Hey,
the sign?
can you give Magnus that sign? Hey, he wants that one. Because he drew that one.
Come here, little man. Stand up here.
Do you want to go up high? Yes, please. It's just doing video, so just aim it, please.
I think you guys should be sisters. We are. We're all sisters.
I don't have to push a button? Oh, right.
Yeah, we are.
Oh,
Our creator.
End the lockdown.
End the lockdown.
Nicole, can you move over both sides? Both sides.
Thank you.
Yeah, this one as well. This side as well.
yeah, it is.
Okay, does someone want me to hold the camera for them? I can take a picture for them?
Reverse
Oh,
it.
Hayley's got a few.
Cool.
So that's
Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, we'll get them off Facebook. Go, Brizzy. Oh, look. The police are taking pictures too.
I noticed.
We're going straight
So
to
they
the
can
face
identify us
recognition
later on.
software.
Well done, Sarge.
We're all becoming inmates.
Hey, coppers, you might learn something. Have a read while you're standing there.
We're doing this for you.
Have a read, yeah. Your families are involved as well. Wake up.
Well, my darlings, for your babies as well. Good
Yep.
on you, Hayley. You
It's not
tell
worth
them,
it for a
darling.
wage in a so-called career.
Selling your souls.
All right, the energy's changing.
Okay.
Let's keep it up. Keep that
Blue energy,
up.
baby. Blue energy.
I know. I love it. All right, we are done.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. All right, now who's coming next week?
I'm going on Saturday.
The big one. We're all coming. We're all coming.
Yeah, so I can put in for one on Sunday on the Gold Coast. May as well just leave this recording. So Brisbane next week on the 30th from 1 p.m. until 3 p.m. at King George Square, walking again to Parliament. A different route than we took today, and then on the day after, the Sunday, somewhere in the Gold Coast, maybe along the Cavill Mall or something like that, or along the beach there. I haven't put an application in for that one yet because I thought that people were switching to just do the Brisbane one. Yeah, what? But I'll put that into it. Yeah, we're going to get Hungry Jacks now. Okay, thanks everyone from all the different groups. Invite your friends. So we just finished our protest a while back, and then there's some other people protesting too. See, they got the flags across the road, the red ones. Yeah, that's funny. Do you want to quickly go over and say hello? Good girl. Come talk to someone. Because there's people that are protesting again. I'll put this in there?
I'll put it in.
Good. Okay, come baby. We just go say hello to people. There's some people that don't like me there. It is funny. G'day, glad to see other people protesting. We just had our protest.
Oh, we're not protesting.
Oh, well, yeah, exercise session or whatever.
No, we're doing a historic walk-around tour of Brisbane.
Ah, that's right. I remember from 2 weeks ago. But anyway, cheerio. Met you a couple of weeks ago, if you remember.
So we just walk around with this. We've gone down today to the old Customs House. And
Yep.
every week we do a different spot because there's so much around Brisbane that,
Yeah,
Still
well, it's
historic.
lovely old buildings
Yes.
everywhere still too.
Yes.
G'day, I'm Arjay.
Hi, I'm Leah.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Not only that,
What's your name?
Ian,
Ian, Arjay.
as citizens,
Arjay. Yeah,
as subjects of the Queen, these are ours.
yeah,
Yeah, because they belong to the Commonwealth.
yeah,
Yeah, and at the moment,
yeah. Don't worry.
because the Australia is in receivership, they're all closed down.
Yeah.
They're all taking ownership. Well, we've come around to claim them back for the Commonwealth.
Yeah. So just so you know, you probably already know, but next week on Saturday from 1 p.m. till 3 p.m. there is a protest. There's going to be authorised.
We can't protest.
You can protest.
No, we can't.
Oh, you might not be able to.
No, we can't because we are subjects as opposed to citizens.
Yeah.
So because we're subjects, we have to actually follow the treaties that we've signed up to.
Okay, fair
So
enough.
we cannot be non-belligerent, non-combative, and going to protests is actually being belligerent to the government.
Fair
So
enough,
we
then.
can't.
Okay.
Unfortunately, citizens can.
Yeah.
But you will be arrested because that's what they can do to citizens.
Oh, we just had a big protest.
And
there were multiple groups, so
Yeah.
there was authorised protests too.
Okay, good.
And then also we put in for exemptions for the COVID rules, so it's not 10 people only. But then this week's ones weren't dealt with in time, which is garbage.
Yep.
But then we've already got it for the next lot of weekends. So anyway, cheerio.
Have a lovely day. Thank
You too. You go say, let's say hello to other people. It's just me.
He's a good-looking dog, that one.
Hello.
Hey, nice to meet
Karen,
you.
I'm Arjay. G'day.
Andrew, how are you?
Nice to meet you. I'm fine. We just had a protest.
How did it go?
It was fine.
No arrests or
No, the
CERT up there.
yeah. What's that?
CERT, the Special Tactical Response Emergency
Ah,
Team.
well, they have people on the roofs with sniper guns.
Oh no, they had a van. They just had a van there.
Ah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it went
They're
fine.
only looking for people that are going to be acting out
Yeah.
and angry and
Yeah, so they got pissed off when we went to Speaker's Corner because there's other groups protesting there anyway, and then they thought it was my group because this week's one was done with the 10-person limit. No, so I had authorisation for a 10-person protest because it has to follow COVID directions. I put in exemptions, which you can do, but they weren't dealt with magically in time. But we've got protests going every weekend, and we've already put in exemptions for, next week, the week after, the week after.
Yep.
And then from next week it's changing to Saturdays here. We might do something on the Gold Coast on Sunday.
yeah. We move ours around as well.
Yeah. Well, that way other people get to see it as well instead of just one group. Anyway, cheerio.
Yep, good day.
Bye. We got to find Nadine now. I don't know where she is. And she said her phone was dying too. You want me to hold anything for you? Cheerio. You want me to carry stuff? Okay, go on. Boop, boop, boop.